All right, let's make a formal introduction for our listeners. Good afternoon, Sebastian. My name is Claudio, and I'm calling you from Washington, D.C., from the studios in Fairfax City. We're very grateful that Sebastian Reynolds accepted our invitation to our show. Sebastian, welcome to the show, man.
Hello, and hi to everyone listening. And it's thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Sebastian. Let's go back to the beginning of your life. Were you born like in a musical family? How old were you when you perhaps began taking, I don't know, guitar lessons, piano lessons, that kind of stuff?
Interesting question. Thank you. So I started playing music when I was, well, very young. I think the for some reason I can't remember this very clearly at all, but I think when I was about 3 or 4 years old, I I loved the Pink Panther, the cartoon of the Pink Panther, and I
Yeah.
really loved the music with that saxophone melody. And apparently, I said to my mum, "Oh, I want to play that." And my mum and dad weren't really that musical. They liked music, they listened to a lot of music, but they didn't really play. They didn't have careers or anything to do with the arts. My grandmother, actually, she was my main sort of inspiration in the family. She was like artistic. She played piano, she painted, she had been interested in acting. And so, but yeah, my mum did a bit of research and found out that because obviously if you're 4 years old, you can't hold a saxophone, you just can't physically play one. But the fingering is basically the same as the recorder. And obviously you can play the recorder from that age. So my mum said, okay, I'll get you a recorder. And if you go to lessons and if you go to the classes and everything, when you're 12 years old, I'll buy you a saxophone. And I did it. I played recorder all through primary school. I have a memory of just being in the sort of, in the classroom at lunchtime and it's sunny and all my friends are playing outside, but I'm there diligently playing the recorder. And yeah, so I did it. And then when I was 12, I got rewarded with my saxophone. And I can remember we went off to buy it somewhere and coming home and just playing it for the first time in the dining room of my old family home. But it's funny because then at that kind of age, I started to get interested in, I think what like the first album I had, or one of the first albums that I remember really vividly was What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis. And
Yeah.
it was sort of, I'm 40, I'm about to turn 41. So when I was coming into I was born in 83. So I guess in about 95 was when I was starting to get interested in sort of what was contemporary at the time, like new music, and it was the sort of Britpop explosion. So I really got interested in sort of Pulp and Blur and Suede and Oasis
Yeah.
were kind of favorite bands at that kind of age. And then I think as I got a bit older, then I started to get a bit more interested in sort of more experimental music, and Radiohead brought out Kid A. And obviously being from Oxford as well, Radiohead were a band that we really sort of worshipped. And yeah, Kid A and Amnesiac were just real big inspirations, and Mezzanine by Massive Attack. And some of
Yeah.
these, and really enjoying cinema as well, and even things like the Lawrence of Arabia soundtrack and like soundtrack music and stuff. And I guess I started to get, but it was really like my heroes as a teenager when I started to sort of play in bands and so on. Where I really loved Jarvis, and I think for a while I thought I was going to be a sort of front man or whatever, but then Johnny Greenwood really as the sort of weird noise maker guy. And also what Matt Bellamy was doing with Muse and the sort of early records. But I was a keyboard player, so sort of borrowing from those sort of aesthetics, but as a keyboard player, and that was sort of my template for my role in the bands that I played in from when I was a teenager.
So you mentioned you were in several bands when you were in equivalent of high school here when you were, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 years old. And so eventually you finish high school, right? So any family pressure about, on one hand, you wanted to follow the music path, the music career. On the other hand, do you any family pressure to, hey, forget about music, man, go to school, get a career, get a house, get married, and you're not going to make any money as a musician, or you have the freedom to fail, so to speak, and then come back and
I think I probably went the middle way between those two. Like, I mean, I think my mum and dad found it really difficult because they could always tell that I was talented and that I was doing some interesting things and playing with some really great bands, but
yeah.
they just couldn't really. I think they were a bit frustrated because they had zero experience of actually making a career in music and so on, and they
Mm.
couldn't really help me much. So I think they were a bit. But I think what I did, I ended up. I worked in Oxford in a shop and was playing in loads of bands and stuff. And then I remember a friend of mine who was in London. He called me up or he told me, "Oh, I'm working in this music PR company in London, and there's an internship. You come and do it. Just come and get involved." And on quite a whim, without much notice, I think I quit my job in Oxford and then took this internship at this PR company in London and moved down there. And yeah, it was good. It was exciting, and I was working for some pretty big name artists, and really like I was only working for the company for sort of a year or two. I can't really remember, year and a half, something like that. And then that once I'd worked in the company for a while, it sort of inspired me to. I didn't get on very well in the company overall, but I learned a hell of a lot, and I learned basically how to do PR. And then I decided to go freelance and then set up my own. Or I'd already been putting on a lot of gigs, so I already had a lot of experience in sort of the gig producing side of things, putting on events. And then I sort of brought in with that also doing PR. So then that meant that I could work for myself. I didn't have to work a sort of 9 to 5 day job. And it was also involved in the music industry. It wasn't obviously actually from my playing, but it had a lot of positive benefits for my music career because I had all this network of contacts and meeting people all the time. And I was playing in my 20s, I played in some great bands who sort of I think just got unlucky basically. There's one band in particular that I was in called the Epstein, and they were great sort of country folk Americana. There's a couple of their albums on Spotify. I'd encourage your listeners to check them out. Ollie has a magnificent voice and he's a great frontman. And you know we got a deal with PS for Benelux, and we were touring a lot in Holland and Germany and stuff. And we had a following. You know, we were playing. I think at our peak, we played at the Vera in Groningen, which is a very famous, legendary venue. And it's a funny venue. There's all these stories about the guy, Pete. I think his name was Peter, the guy who runs the venue. He had some really funny stories about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana playing there in the early days. And they apparently Kurt was saying, "Oh, you know, there's this girl, and yeah, I think I love her. I think I should marry her." And apparently Pete said, "Yeah, man, phone her up." And then it was Courtney Love, and he apparently phoned Courtney Love from the Vera and Groningen to get engaged with her and stuff while they were on tour,
Wow, wow, what a
which is pretty cool. The guy was just full of cool stories, but that's a digression. But yeah, so I was touring and we were playing the Paradiso in the small room in Amsterdam, and you know couple of 200-300 people turning up to see us and singing the words back at us. And, you know, we had a real sort of brush with fame. And then we signed this deal, 1 album deal with PS, and it just didn't quite click. It didn't quite happen. And then the second record, and yeah, the second record that I played on the third Epstein album didn't quite click. And I don't know why really. We were such a good band, and so yeah, and there's that, and there's a few other projects that I was involved in as well, and I started as well probably more like in my sort of late 20s early 30s. I started to get more interested in experimenting in my own sort of solo work, and I've always sort of noodled around and played around, but I've always been reliant on other people to collaborate with. Like it was only relatively late on that I got my own laptop and I started to work in Ableton myself. And I'm not really that sort of technically minded in a certain way. So it was quite a long, slow, painful process of getting my head around using Ableton and actually producing stuff to the level where I was confident to release it. And it's still a sort of ongoing project, and I still work with a producer, Mike, but I'm much more confident now in my own sort of thinking, and I've done some as well as producing my own releases and putting them out, which has kind of culminated in the Canary album, which I presume we'll talk about shortly.
Sure,
So
sure.
collaborations with Anne Müller and Alex Stolze, the violinist and cellist from Germany, the solo collective. We've released 2 albums together, and I've done a series of contemporary dance soundtracks for my wife's company, Neon Dance. So yeah, I'm still like very kind of collaborative in my nature. I mean, there are these guys like Aphex Twin and people who are sort of singular geniuses who just squirrel themselves away in their bedroom and just churn out this like genius material. But I mean, I do like working at home, but I'm naturally an extrovert, and I do enjoy collaboration. And I also think that my imagination is so kind of crazy that sometimes I benefit from a strong thematic concept for a record. And I think I've got 2 records coming up, which are more or less finished, that I'm very pleased with. And also a series of collaborations like with Adrian on the dance shows, and a film project I'm working on. And I think I actually benefit from kind of containing my like creativity and actually having a focus. I think that's been something that's been very positive for me, I think.
Right, your album, thank you. Your album, your debut album, Canary, was released in September 2023, so it's about 6 months ago or so. How difficult was to put that together? Feel free to elaborate on the struggle. You went on your own, you did it on your computer, collecting samples for different people, and I listened to the album, and it's great, but feel free to elaborate in how difficult was the struggle to put it at the hustle, putting it together, because you did everything on your own, going to a record label. It's, they do the PR, they do the promotion, they hire an engineer, and they take, I don't know, 50% of the profit. On the other way, you go on your own, you do it on your own computer without, you need to learn how to master the stuff and do it better. And you don't have any distribution, you need to figure it out. So you go to Bandcamp so people can buy your album, and then what do you do next, right? So feel free to elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. I think that like um sort of collaborators and partners in any sort of field, it's a bit like a wife or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband. It's like they're brilliant if they're the right person.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it's like I think people like the idea of having a manager or having an agent or whatever. And it's like if you can find the right person, then I think it can work wonderfully. I mean, I feel like there's pluses and minuses on all sides, and you always have to try and make a decision and look at what's realistically available to you at the time. And obviously I'm fortunate because of my job, my day job, my PR job. It's basically been my career for the last 16, 17 years to help people release music. I mean, essentially, like obviously my first and principal thing is the actual publicity side of it, getting it onto blogs, getting it onto the radio, getting it into magazines and so on. But I do so much work, aside from that, in a much more holistic way, like planning the release process based on how to hit streaming services best. What can we do with YouTube? What can we do with social media stuff? What about pressing vinyl? What about touring? Like, I've had to think about this stuff for hundreds of clients for a decade and a half. So I'm sort of an expert, really. I don't feel like I any qualms in saying that, because it's been my job to basically manage release processes for a long time. So I'm like probably better equipped than a lot of people to try and navigate myself through. And I've had interest from some of the bigger I'm not going to name any names, but I have had a few different sort of labels and the publisher and stuff interested in what I'm doing. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but I have got the sort of forming of relationships with some of these people. But I think that such a big thing in the music industry to remember is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And that, like, if you take money off people in the form of an advance, it's a loan, and then they own stuff. And there's so many examples. Like recently, there's been this whole acrimony between Fortet and Domino over like the charging for the records and stuff, and and it's you've got to remember that when you sign stuff over, they own it in perpetuity. Well, it depends on the deal, but that's the traditional deal. And it's like with Canary, it was a hell of a lot of work. And I think actually the hardest thing about the record was just thinking about the production, thinking if it was the strongest version of itself, and do the tracks work, like slightly more like the sort of A&R side of it, like the making sure it's a coherent record, what singles to bring out, and video, like a lot of that stuff. And the more sort of creative stuff can actually be a little bit harder if you're too caught up in it and you're too personal and you're too close to it. So I've got a team of really good people around me who I work with, like Mike Bannard, who's the main sort of producer and mix engineer, who I work with a lot, and he did a lot of work on Canary. Greg Stewart, drummer and percussionist and producer, who I work with a lot. And yeah, and there's Lupo, who does the mastering in Berlin, and like there's a whole team of people. But in terms of actually putting the record together, like it was, I mean, some of the material is really old. Like some of the material goes back to, well, like 20 years or something, like goes, or a long time anyway, 15 years maybe. Like it's a collection of material. Some of it's I made up almost on the spot in the studio, and some of it has sort of been put together from old tracks that I've reworked. But it's sort of come together over the last sort of 3 years. So I'm really proud of it. I am really proud of it, but it's taken a long time. Like I've taken my time over it, and I made a promise to myself that like, okay, it's as good as it can be, and I'm happy to be judged by it, and whatever happens out of it is like, okay, fine. But I do feel very fortunate to have had all these collaborators and people sort of involved around me.
That is great. So let me ask you from a sort of a strategy point of view, right? Could be independent of your record, right? Because you're too personal to record, but your records, my record, let's say if I were to produce a great electronic music or whatever, the kind of, record that I'm producing, working with, John, Peter, and Mary, whatever. What's the process of, putting the record out there? You end up contacting different, record labels, radio, you do the PR, try to promote it on Facebook and YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. So what your strategy is different compared to anybody else? That man, there are a billion people in the world using Facebook. There are a billion people using Instagram. Well, TikTok became popular. Okay, we need to do short videos every day on TikTok, on Instagram, so people can see their stuff. But what else could be done in order to, in your case, or in my case, produce, put my record out there or put your record out there, right? So for mass media. So how you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I feel like, so for me, it was a combination approach of using publicists and pluggers that I've worked with for a while now. Like there's a guy called Ollie Dutton who has Obscene Strategies in the UK as a radio promotional company, and I worked with him on Canary, and he did some plugging for the tracks on there, and I ended up doing some of it myself as well, just because I have the networks and so on. And then I worked with a publicist, Thomas Brunn, who's based in Vienna, but he services sort of Austria, Germany, and the sort of German-speaking territories in areas in Switzerland. And so because I've built up a bit of a following in Germany thanks to him and thanks to performing there with Anna and Alex. And I also worked with a publicity company, marketing company in New York called 19th and 7th, who so we sort of targeted in terms of PR, US, UK, and Germany, because I'm based in the UK, so that obviously makes sense. And I have a following in Germany, so that makes sense. And then in the US, obviously a lot of the big sort of media sites are very powerful and have a lot of influence internationally. So and then also with 19th and 7th, we did some YouTube, Spotify, and Instagram marketing work as well, and some growth work. And yeah, it was a sort of, it was a fascinating process, and there were definitely pluses and minuses. There were definitely some things that I would do differently next time. But no, it was, and but I think it's almost like when you think about publicity, like when you asked me this question about with Canary, and you know, I invested thousands of pounds in the promotion for Canary, and we put in a huge amount of work, and there were some great rewards as well, great return and great plays, lots of lovely reviews and some interviews, and Six Music have been really kind to me considering the nature of the record. And so yeah, I'm really pleased. I saw some stat the other day about how isn't there like 46 million tracks on Spotify that have never been played or something crazy like that. I
Well,
can't
yeah,
remember. Someone needs to look it
very
up.
very likely. Yeah, very
It's, you
likely.
know,
Yeah.
and if you think of the amount of exposure that I've had, I just feel, you know, just the excitement of the fact that this material is so personal to me, and it's sat on my computer for years, some of it for years, and then suddenly it's out in the world being listened to all over the world, and it's yeah, I'm really but it's overwhelming. I think when I think about all of the things I could be doing, because it's endless. It's literally what you can do with promotion is endless. You could be doing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there would still be more you could be doing. It's just limitless what you could be doing. So I think you need to like try and work out what your weaknesses are, and how you want to put yourself across. I think one of the, sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I think that one of the absolute biggest decisions there is to make at the moment as an artist
Yeah.
is how much you want to trade on your personality and your sort of just who you are as a person, and how much you want to like detach you as a person from the promotional process, because you have that choice at the moment. You know, you can be really quite removed. I've got one artist I'm representing who's chosen to remain anonymous completely in the sort of promotional process. And some of my artists are very introverted and they don't like to talk a lot about themselves. They feel uncomfortable sort of putting themselves up. But there's others who they go on Instagram and they put the thing on and they're chatting away like all the time. And I would say that like I think the quality of the music ultimately is what shines forth. And if you put stuff out there enough and keep plugging away and doing whatever process you're following, you have to keep deciding, do I want to carry on with this or not, or just stop? But I think that there is one segment of artists who are doing really well because they're very charismatic and because they're good on camera and because they're quite comfortable putting themselves out there, like I am now, like talking on camera, but doing it because I feel like in this world of sort of AI generated content, AI generated music, and a lot of stuff that's very faceless and very corporate and very bland, that people are drawn to the human dimension and something that can't be faked. Like you can now use these AI algorithms to just sort of generate random music and whatever music you need. But I think people, and it's always been the case, but I think that people are, as much as ever, so drawn to the sort of individual human story of the music. They're as interested in you as a personality, and in some cases, almost like a guru type figure, as like the music itself. And I think as an artist, you have to make a choice
Yeah.
as to whether you want to go through that. And I'll be honest, and I am having a lot of soul searching at the moment. Like I'm still trying to decide like how much I want to sort of be more. I happily do interviews and so on, but I haven't really done much sort of Instagram live or like YouTube, just like me just talking about stuff online.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
no, but right. So to putting yourself out there, but how you need to eventually do the math, right? How you recover investment, right? You mentioned that, well, putting my record, right, out there cost me, I don't know, I want to make a number up, right? I don't know, 20,000 pounds, whatever, to just put a number there, right? Well, you're not going to be touring in a lot of city because you're, although you were known in other bands, you started with a new project and so on and so forth, right? You're not going to sell, 10,000 copies to record an investment. You're not going to be selling 10,000 t-shirts or doing meet and greet and so on and so forth. So where's the trade-off, right? Between the money that you're spending versus recovering that investment. And of course, you do it because you like it, right? So you don't want to go in the hole for 20,000 pounds again, because then your wife will divorce you, right? but on the
She
other
wouldn't have
hand,
married me in the
you want to
first
put out
place.
there, huh?
She wouldn't have married me in the first place if she
Oh,
wasn't a supporter.
yeah, but on the other hand, you gotta record your investment, right? Just in my hypothetical example, you spend 15, 20 grand, 20,000 pounds, put it together. How you recover the investment, right? Facebook likes, yeah, people will say like. People doesn't bring you any money. You can upload videos in YouTube, and maybe 1,000 people will see them. You're not going to make any money. You're not doing that much. So how you recover financial point of view, right? How you recover that investment? I mean, as an artist, you have no choice, right? You really want to release the stuff, and of course, I understand that because it's part of your life. Basically, but where's the trade-off between art and a
Well,
return on
see,
investment of the time and money you spent?
yeah. Well, see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch myself as a self-help guru and make loads of money selling Viagra.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know you're joking.
I've got some special supplements actually. I'm gonna launch them on this show, and they're gonna make me £1 million in the next 5 months. So
Right.
I'm gonna see a huge return in my investment. Selling supplements online, basically. No, I think that I mean I guess I'm in a slightly different position in that, like, I have had some really nice commissions for the music that I make for the dance projects.
Right.
So I have had some really quite, like, not insignificant sums of money from that.
Got it.
And I have been, like, the tours that I did with Anna and Alex in Germany were, like, they weren't huge sums of money, but they did pay a return. I mean, we did make money from them between the record sales and the performance fees and so on.
Hmm.
And yeah, and there's a lot more possibilities on the cards for this coming year. Into I can't really talk too much about some of the projects that are kind of on the cards at the moment, but there's certainly, like,
Hmm.
things that are much more sort of money oriented. I mean, I feel like with releasing your own music, yeah, sure. I mean, with Canary, the actual costs of making the music were fairly low because I did a lot of it myself. And then
Hmm.
there was a couple of musicians involved, and a lot of the musicians involved, actually, I paid with royalties rather than with fees. So in the short term, I didn't have that outlay, but of course, like, when there's radio play, or if there's some ad syncs or so on, then I'll obviously be losing shares to the artists. But that was the sort of deals that I made.
Right.
But I feel like there's certainly some more dance related projects in the pipeline, and some other much more sort of corporate type projects that are in the pipeline as well. And I feel like with releasing stuff, it is a gamble, it's a loss leader. You've got to do it because you love it, and you can't be resentful and feel like if something hasn't sort of quite caught as it might have done, that it's boo hoo, poor me. Like, I'm proud of Canary. I can hear its strengths and I can hear its weaknesses, and I can hear what I would do differently next time. And it's been a hugely helpful learning experience in terms of just learning the craft of making a record and putting it out. And I've got 2 more records which are more or less finished, which what's happened with Canary will inform what's going to happen in the future in terms of my releasing and what to do and not. And also, it's it is a gamble, and you shouldn't gamble money you can't afford to lose, but it's an investment. And also the thing is that money I've spent on Canary, which is not outside of the ballpark that you've guessed at, that could be made to look like small change if and when you did get an ad sync, or you got a film sync, or you got there's so many ways that things can happen, and you've got to put yourself out there and put yourself in the way of luck. But I feel like strategically with Canary, like, I'm glad that I don't regret doing it, actually. And I feel like whatever's going to happen in the future, I'm just glad that music's out there and people are listening to it, and I can get by day to day, and I could afford to spend the money that I've invested in it. And I think that because of what's happening behind the scenes, which I can't talk about at the moment, it is going to pay off. The investment will pay off. And especially the fact that even though it's a big outlay, I own every penny if and when something happens. Like if one of the tracks does get picked up for an ad or a film or a Netflix thing, or so it's like, I think you've got to sort of see it as part of a process and part of the long game. And it's a huge, these powerful position to be in, where you own things. Like I released it through my own label, so I own the masters. But you have to be in it for the love, and you have to be in it for the long haul, and you can't necessarily think about, you're always looking to try and capitalize on what you've done and think, okay, well, I've done that. What were the lessons learned? What were the positives? What were the negatives? And how can I move forward and try and capitalize on what I achieved with it?
Is it difficult? Thank you. Is it difficult to get airplay on, let's say, on the BBC Six Music? I think there was a channel that you end up playing a couple of your tracks.
Yeah, I mean, the word difficult is a weird one, isn't it? Because it's like saying, is it difficult to run 5,000 meters in 15 minutes? Well, that depends on who you are.
Right.
For some people, that's jogging.
Yeah.
For most people, that is like completely outside of the realms of possibility. But for some people, it's like, well, yeah, that's your like half marathon pace or whatever. It's like, well, it's a jog. It depends on all of the variables, and that, like, obviously you could argue fortunate in that I've been working in the industry for so long, and I have all these networks and connections and all this stuff. And I wouldn't say it was easy. I'd say I've been slightly lucky in the amount of support I've had from Six Music, just based on like the kind of music that Canary is, that it's quite abstract, it's quite art house and so on. And it just seems that, like, I found a fan, particularly with Steve Lamacq, who's been a massive supporter in the last 2 or 3 years, which is thanks to Ollie at Obscene Strategies for his work there. And so but a lot of the others have played me, like Gideon Coe and Tom Ravenscroft, and it's like, is it easy? Is it hard? I don't know. It's not. I don't think that's quite the right lens. It's like the actual nuts and bolts of it. Like, it's good to write a good press release. It's good to have a nice press release, but the overwhelming thing is just whether they like something or not. And obviously they get, these DJs get sent, and the producers get hundreds of tracks every week to sort of comb through.
Exactly right. So
it's always like statistically unlikely in some ways, but then they've got to play something. And there's a weird thing in the music business where people, on the one hand, everyone's sort of overwhelmed constantly, but then on the other hand, no one wants to be the person who turned down the Beatles. Like, everyone is constantly on high alert for what's going to be the big new thing, because no one knows, and no one knows where it's going to come from. So people do watch their emails like hawks, and stuff gets missed and all this stuff. But I think that it is that sort of right place, right time thing. And it's like, in a way, you could say, is it easy or hard to win the lottery? I mean, is it hard to win the lottery?
Well, the odds are against you, right? So if you pick a number or a
Well, then why
combination,
bother playing? Well, then
huh?
don't bother playing. Do
So
you know what I mean? Like,
right. So yeah, people fool themselves thinking that they will be winning, but the probabilities are 1 in a million. So it's let's say 1 million people put $1 there. One person will get the $1 million, hypothetically, and the other 999.99 will lose the dollar, right? And so the odds are against, right? So if you don't put the dollar, you will never win. That's by definition, right? If you don't put your dollar, in my example, you will never win, right? But the probability of winning are 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 very, very hard. Like you mentioned. A radio station like the BBC Six received, I don't know, to make something up, 1,000 tracks a week, right? Well, some may come with a good PR, some may not come with a good PR, but eventually it's a person that read the PRs, hopefully listen to the stuff and say, man, this stuff is great. I don't care about the PR, or maybe the guy is from Germany, doesn't speak that English that well like myself, but it's very good music. So let's play our thing, right? But the other, 900 track would never be listened. So I suppose it's a combination of the music need to be good, obviously. You need to be persistent. There need to be a PR process and a little bit of luck, I suppose, right? Because when a track is playing on radio, it will open, I suppose, more possibilities. Then again, I don't know how it is in the UK, but at least here in the United States, um, the number of people that are listening to radio, real radio, right? Real radio on the car, right? Um, there are fewer and fewer, right? People pay, $10 for subscription with Spotify, like I do. Listen, when they go in the car, they on in your case the metro, the tube, going to work or whatever, they listen to Spotify. So I don't know. Do a lot of people you listen to radio there in the UK or
yeah, I think they do. I think the
yeah,
stats are like for the biggest shows on Six. You can fact check me on this, whoever's listening. But I think
yeah,
I think that the Steve Lamacq drive time show, now Hugh Stevens is taking it over Tuesday to Friday. Steve does it
yeah,
on a Monday still.
yeah.
I think it's over 1 million listeners. I think
Wow.
the biggest shows on Six Music still have like significant numbers, and like some bands do really well out of a lot of exposure on Six Music more so than others. Just depends on all the variables. But I think like in terms of things being easy and hard, I think one point I'd make is so for an EP that I brought out a couple of years ago, the
Mm.
EP was called Nihilism is Pointless,
Yeah.
and there's a title track, Nihilism is Pointless. And I just sort of made that track up in a couple of hours really quickly, just because I felt like the EP needs one more tune. It's just sort of filler. It's nice to have a track. I like having a title track. Most of my releases have a sort of
Sure,
title
sure.
track. And I just sort of literally made it really quickly as an afterthought. And there's been other tracks that I've released. There's a track on that EP actually, How's Lament. That I really thought, oh man, people are going to go crazy for this. They're going to love this. This is going to be huge or whatever. And nothing. And then Nihilism is Pointless. Steve Lamacq picked it up and
Mm.
he played it loads. And he played it as like one of his favorite tracks of the year, halfway through the year. And I
Wow.
literally added it in there almost not as a joke, but it was sort of like just, oh yeah, whatever, mate.
Afterthought, right?
I think that even as the artist, sometimes you can get really attached to something and think, oh, this is going to be huge. This is going to be breakthrough, blah, blah, blah. And there's other things where, like, I remember seeing an interview with Noel Gallagher from Oasis, and he was talking about when they were writing for What's the Story, and he'd written Wonderwall, and they recorded it, and he really didn't think that much of it at all. And then the record company said, no, that's a tune, that's going to be huge. And it was. But the band were like, well, it's just another tune on the album.
That's right. Yeah.
I think these
Wow.
stories are really common where people like just don't see it coming, you know, and it's happened with artists that I work for as well, where I pick something out off the album, say, oh, actually, I think we should push that a bit. And they again, like there's an artist I work for, and I did it, and again, he made that track as sort of filler. It was just sort of made to fill out the album, and that was the track that got played on Six Music. So it's weird. It's really weird because everything is so weird and unpredictable. And there's been other times where I thought, yeah, this is great, and it has been played. And there's been times where I thought, oh no, this isn't very. Oh, I'll send it out, and it's done really well. So it's like I think it is sometimes so incredibly unpredictable, and that
You,
sometimes you can work on projects where you hardly do any work. You literally send stuff out, and it just starts getting played and it does really well. And there's other stuff where you just like you push really hard and nothing and like Rick Rubin's been saying recently, I saw him interviewed online, and he was saying about how he'd work on two records around the same time, and one record would just blow up and go huge and the other one just wouldn't. And he said they were both really good, but it's just that one sort of hit the zeitgeist. It was just right time, right place, just sort of connected, and the other one just didn't connect for whatever reason. And so I think is that to do with things being hard and easy? I don't think it is. I think ultimately he said it just sometimes it's the right time for the universe, just like everything lines up and it clicks. But you have to put yourself in the way of luck, and you have to do the hard work, and you have to be willing to like do hard things, do uncomfortable things you don't want to do, and put yourself out there and work on your weaknesses and so on. But yeah, I think it's I think the idea of thinking of it as like hard and easy.
Yeah.
I think hard is good in the sense that whatever happens in your career, if you've addressed your own personal weaknesses and issues, then your life will go better. Whether you're making it in music or not, it's probably up to God or like whatever you believe in, right? Ultimately. But I think the idea of things being hard, sometimes it can breed a certain kind of resentment. I think you have to be really careful about, oh, it's so unfair. Why has that guy got a career and I don't? Why is that guy getting the breaks and I'm not? That guy is no good. His music's rubbish. Why is he successful? So often you find that people who are successful, they're as baffled as everyone else. Like they don't really understand why it's gone sort of so bananas, you know? It's like,
no, your album is pretty good. Before you release an album, you have a couple EP or called, I think it's called Athletics, the University. Remember, if I remember correctly, and I know you are a runner, so Athletic maybe likely you end up picking the name because you ran a lot. But what was the motivation to put them together? They're very good actually. I went to a bad camp. I listened to all your stuff this week in the evening as I was preparing questions for the interview, and they're very, very good. They're very, very good, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, it's there's lots of diverse influences in there, lots of from the sort of more hard electronica stuff to the sort of more ambient and the classical and everything. So
correct, yeah.
I'm afraid, Claudia, I'm going to need to leave quite soon.
Oh, yeah. You told me.
We can come back another time and finish, or do you want to just because I need to help put my son to bed?
That's fine. We can continue. We can do this. We can finish now as part one, and then we can connect again and do part two during the week or something, whenever you have the time.
Yeah.
So. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, man. Take it easy.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. I learned a lot from you, man.
Yeah, and let's connect and we'll do part two in the week.
Perfect. Thank you.